Okay, can people hear me? Is this switched on? Welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining this side event under the auspices of the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. And I'm happy to see a lot of people in the audience, including people who were in Nairobi for the high-level meeting at the end of last year, which I was not able to get to, but others who I last saw in Bangkok a few weeks before, and it's very good to have you all here. And I'm very happy to have the panelists, distinguished panelists, who I will introduce shortly. The theme of this event, as you know, as a side event for the High-Level Political Forum, is the importance of country-level multi-stakeholder partnerships in a changing development landscape. So a nice, snappy, short title, the kind we like in the UN. But we're very grateful to Bangladesh and Canada, to the missions and the governments of Bangladesh and Canada for hosting this meeting. I'm going to keep my remarks very brief because you've come to hear from the panelists, not from me. But I will just say this, when UN member states agreed in September 2015 here in New York on the Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2030, everybody was well aware that those commitments cannot be achieved by governments alone, to say the least. All UN member states do already, and in effect have reaffirmed their commitment to engage with other actors, a wider set of actors, even more intensively than in the past. And I think we'll see that theme continue to grow and to deepen. Even, for example, in the Secretary General's report last week, his vision report, which he presents on Wednesday to UN member states, about further enhancements, further strengthening of the UN development system, the issue of partnerships and strengthening partnerships, more coherent UN approaches to partnerships, was an important element of that report for further work and further discussion with member states. So what this means is that governments and international institutions, including the UN and its agencies, will need to work together to mobilise the trillions of dollars needed to achieve Agenda 2030. We'll need to work together to reach the most marginalised, to ensure that no one is left behind as we achieve the SDGs. But to do all of that, we will require an even greater diversity and higher quality and intensity of partnerships that go well beyond government and public institutions. And that requires honest, open dialogue to build mutual trust, generate shared accountability, and so on. And we've already seen in the first couple of days of this year's High-Level Political Forum, great progress has been made. We're hearing it in voluntary national views from many different countries, from all parts of the world. Great progress being made to create what in my speaking notes are called multi-stakeholder institutional frameworks, partnerships, to guide implementation of the SDGs. So that's what we're going to hear about from our panelists. I will say I'm sorry that we were hoping to have Ambassador Kamau of Kenya here today. Unfortunately, he's been unable to make the event, but I'm very glad and very grateful that Joshua Mvudu, Director of Economic Affairs in the Foreign Ministry of Kenya, has joined us in his place. To complete a distinguished panel, and I'll briefly introduce each of them and then turn to the first speaker. But we will hear first from Mr. Kazi Shafiqul Azam, and forgive my pronunciation, who is the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Finance in Bangladesh, the Economic Relations Division. Bangladesh, as you know, is a co-chair of the Global Partnership, and Mr. Azam is the alternate co-chair in that capacity. He is also an alternate governor of the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, and acts as the National Designated Authority to the Green Climate Fund. I think he will open with a few words about the Global Partnership, and we'll then hear from Mr. Monowar Ahmed, his colleague from the Economic Relations Division in the Finance Ministry, who is at the centre of Bangladesh's efforts to drive forward the work of the Global Partnership to help realise the Sustainable Development Goals. After that, I'm very happy that we have Ambassador Michael Grant from Canada as a fellow co-host. Michael is the Deputy Permanent Representative of Canada here, with over 20 years of diplomatic experience across several parts of the world, in Central and Eastern Europe, in Latin America and in the Middle East. Canada is a member of the steering committee of the Global Partnership, which helps set the strategic direction for the partnership. We also have Tara Nathan, who is the Executive Vice President for Public-Private Partnerships at MasterCard. And in that capacity, Tara manages MasterCard's international development, and government services and solutions initiatives. And she has forged partnerships that have resulted in the use of payment technology to support financial inclusion, humanitarian response and transparency, among other things. So we're very grateful to you, Tara, for joining us. And last but certainly not least, in addition to Joshua, who I've mentioned already, I think we have Patricia Blankson-Akapo, Program Manager and Team Leader of the Secretariat of the Network for Women's Rights in Ghana, NetRight Ghana. Patricia also co-chairs the Civil Society Platform for Development Effectiveness and is a member of the Women's Working Group on Financing for Development and the Women's Major Group. So as you hear from all of that, a distinguished panel with a great deal of practical experience as policymakers, as analysts, and we're happy to have them all here. And so I'm going to turn first to Mr. Kazi Shofikul Azam to say a few opening words about global partnership.
Mr. Moderator, distinguished speaker and panelist, esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As one of the co-chair of the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this important side event being hosted by the Government of Bangladesh and the Government of Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps all of you know that GPEDC was established in 2011 at the 4th High-Level Forum on Aid Effectiveness in Busan, South Korea. This forum brings together government, international organizations, civil society, parliamentarians, local government, and the private sector to ensure that all development resources are used as efficiently as possible. Through its multi-stakeholder platform, GPEDC aims to maximize the effectiveness of all forms of cooperation for development, putting into practice 4 principles. First, the ownership of development priority by the developing countries, focus on results, inclusive partnership and transparency and mutual accountability. The Nairobi Outcome Document adopted in December 2016 at the 2nd high-level meeting in Kenya reaffirmed the critical importance of the development effectiveness agenda in its support to the achievement of the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development. And I would like to mention here that development landscape is taking new look with the passage of time, where every stakeholder is playing an important role to shape up the partnership architecture for development. Given the gigantic task of SDGs implementation by 2030, nature of interdependency and mutual inclusiveness of the goal and need of vast resources to implement, it is difficult for a single stakeholder to deliver the complexities of sustainable development alone. Therefore, a meaningful and effective partnership of all stakeholders at the country level is crucial for achieving the goal of sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, implementation of the 2030 Agenda also calls for collective effort to improve the quality of our cooperation. Successful partnership bring each partner's core competence and expertise to the table, building synergies to co-create something new and impactful for sustainable development. In this context, the GPEDC offers a unique multi-stakeholder platform to connect stakeholders who can learn from one another and increase the effectiveness of partnership at the global, regional and national level. I hope this side event has given us a chance of sharing our experience on challenge and opportunity of multi-stakeholder partnership, which will feed into the discussion of this high-level political platform, and as well as the guide to GPEDC in the future endeavor. I look forward to effective and fruitful deliberation. Thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, Manuel, please.
Mr. Moderator, distinguished panelists, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I see here many faces whom I met in Kenya and also mentioned by some people in Bangkok. Let me start saying this, that you will agree with me that since its birth or inception, the Global Partnership has been dedicatedly working to ensure effectiveness on development cooperation. So, our efforts are geared up to promote collaboration between development actors, both state and non-state stakeholders, to realize common goal, a global development agenda. Bangladesh, as one of the co-chairs of the GPDC, is equally committed to strengthening the collaborative approach to realize the Agenda 2030 of the Sustainable Development. Since our independence, we have been maintaining an effective partnership with our development partners in Bangladesh. This partnership mechanism has been formalized under the local consultative group mechanism. LCG has several sector working groups aligning with the thematic area of our National Development Plan. The last one was, we had in our development plan 19 thematic areas, so we had 19 working groups co-chaired by one from the government and one from the development partners. While LCG provides partnership opportunities on a regular basis, Bangladesh Development Forum is the apex partnership platform, which involves both development partner, private sector, civil society, government ministries and agencies, and takes place usually biannual basis. Building on the MDG successes, lauded internationally our experiences, our government is committed to attain the SDGs, and accordingly we have taken several policy and administrative measures to ensure collaborative approach in SDG implementations. What we have done, first of all, a chief coordinator of SDG office has been set up in the Prime Minister's office. We have established a high-level interministerial committees. All ministries and divisions are developing their own action plan to reach out to all stakeholders to ensure synergies in their efforts. In practical sense, over the years, we have developed a culture of collaboration in our development planning process. The government has adopted a whole of society approach. I mean, if you remember, going back 2-3 years, we were saying, especially from the partner countries, that we will be approaching a whole of government approach. But now, because of the adaptation of the SDG, we have taken up this whole of society approach, where government agencies, NGOs, civil society, our development partners, the traditional and the emerging, private sector, media is playing or participating in implementation and attaining the SDGs. As mentioned by our Secretary, that the landscape of development financing is evolving both at the global and national level. Bangladesh is also undergoing such shift and changes. Our development finance is no longer only dependent on traditional partners. Rather, emerging economies and southern partners are becoming major sources of development financing for the country. Moreover, the role of the domestic private sector is becoming also highly important. Our current 7 5-year plan projected that about 78% of our financing will be mobilized through the private sector. The government has undertaken distinctive policy measures to create an enabling environment for the private sector. On the other hand, CSOs and NGOs have been contributing significantly to the development of our country. one of the major contributions which we believe of the NGOs and the CSOs is that they can address the development challenges of the last mile people. Government's policy regime provides enabling and working environment for these two key development actors in the country. Considering the changes in the development financing landscapes, we conducted development finance assessment with the support from UNDP regional offices for the first time in Bangladesh to assess the contribution and potentials of different financial flows, including private and public as well as external and domestic resources. DFA is informing both Istanbul Programme of Action and SDG financing plan in Bangladesh, creating greater synergies with both these milestone declaration. Given the changes in development financing architecture, particularly in the context of SDG, an overall restructuring or development partnership in Bangladesh is underway, and the government is working to deepen and expand its partnership approach within the LCG to create opportunities for emerging private partners, private sector and CSO NGOs to become more formal partners in development dialogues and discourses. Distinguished guests, as a conclusion, I would like to mention that SDGs offer huge opportunity to the international community, both in terms of scope of engagement and in terms of development goals. We need to adjust our engagement rules to allow all stakeholders to join hands together for realizing SDGs and eventually for creating a human and peaceful world. Both Bangladesh and GPDC are fully determined towards this dream. We urge upon all partners in development to support GPDC and its leadership to work for global development agenda in a more effective way. The current leadership of GPDC aims at making a difference in the role and contribution of the platform. I sincerely hope that this side event definitely will influence us to reconfirm our commitment to global partnership initiatives and SDGs. With these few words, let me conclude my statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Manwa, and I'm very happy now to turn to Ambassador Michael Grant for 5 minutes, please. Michael.
Thank you very much, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to be here. Permanent Secretary, Additional Secretary, Tara, Joshua, Patricia, it's great to be with you on this panel today. This is a great opportunity for Canada to reaffirm our continuing commitment to work in partnership with all development actors and reinforce the importance of action at the country level, particularly at a time when the development landscape is changing so rapidly. I'm very pleased to mention that Canada, as Michael also said, recently became a member of the Global Partnership Steering Committee. The goals of the Global Partnership are fully consistent with Canada's own goals of making its international assistance more effective, more transparent, and more accountable. Canada is a strong supporter of inclusive, multi-stakeholder approaches for crafting solutions that will make a difference at the country level. Canada recently announced our new feminist international assistance policy, which recognizes that advancing gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls is the best way to reduce poverty, leave no one behind, and build a more prosperous, peaceful, and inclusive world. Our new policy is anchored in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It will enable us to focus our attention on the poorest and most vulnerable as we seek to target those situations in which our support can make a difference. Gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls will now be front and center in our international assistance efforts. As part of our new policy, Canada will strengthen its partnerships, including multi-stakeholder partnerships, with a broad range of civil society organizations, multilateral institutions, the private sector, and country partners. One such example is Canada's work with Jamaica in establishing a group of friends of SDG financing. This group is bringing governments and private sector together to find solution-oriented ideas to finance the SDGs at the speed and scale to make a difference by 2030. Some of the ideas being developed on innovative development financing could be shared through the GPDC in the months and years ahead. Another example of how we are trying to bring together diverse stakeholders is the Global Partnership Initiative on Triangular Cooperation that Canada and Mexico are co-convening. The working group is multi-stakeholder, including government, international organizations, civil society, and private sector. The group is working together to discuss how we can strengthen the effectiveness and impact of triangular cooperation projects on the ground. To be effective, international assistance must respond to local needs and priorities. Our partners will remain, our key partners will remain those governments at the national level and subnational level, but equally important is the role civil society has in implementing the 2030 agenda. And Canada is committed to maintaining strong and meaningful engagement with civil society. That is why, as part of our new feminist international assistance policy, we have allocated $150 million over 5 years to support local women's groups in developing countries to advance the rights of women and promote gender equality. Today, effective and productive partnerships that advance the interests of women and girls are no longer restricted to government relationships. Civil society, international organizations, philanthropic foundations, developing country governments at all levels, the private sector, emerging official donors, and other actors all have a role in building a world where gender equality and the empowerment of women is the rule, not the exception. This demands shared perspectives on the way forward and mutual trust. We have already tested that trust in working together in framing the 2030 agenda. Now we must move forward in delivering its goals, notably that of leaving no one, especially women, behind. We know that building and strengthening partnerships is hard work and demands a change in attitude and the way we work. That is the mandate of GPDC to help with this change. With its multi-stakeholder composition, GPEDC is well placed to play a key role in brokering these partnerships between stakeholders with diverse backgrounds and interests that are essential to our new development landscape. Thank you very much. I look forward to the rest of the remarks and the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael, and I'm grateful to all three of our first speakers for being so concise, because we are keen to have time to bring in members of the audience with questions and comments later on. So we'll continue along the row, and Tara, please, 5 minutes from you with a private sector perspective.
It's quite an audacious objective to speak on behalf of the private sector, but I'll try. I don't have, so I think the private sector representative, I'm supposed to be a little audacious and perhaps maybe a little provocative. So we talk a little differently, I think, and we may express a little bit more controversial opinions, but here goes. Maybe I'll at least get a laugh out of you. Success already. So I'm MasterCard, and what do, right? A lot of people think that MasterCard is a credit card company. I'm hoping if I do one thing today that you all leave understanding that we are not a credit card company. We do not issue credit cards, that's your banks. So don't ask me if I can get you a reduction on your APR, I can't. Your credit is your issue, people. What are we? We are a digital technology company. We happen to be in the payments space. More specifically, we are in the secure data space. So we lay digital transaction or digital payments infrastructure in cities, in communities, in countries. That digital infrastructure can do things like power ID. It can power interoperable global payments. It enables commerce. So it enables essentially our global financial system to thrive. That's what we do. What do? I have a very unique role. I think I have the best job at MasterCard. I actually think I have the best job. No offense to anyone's jobs up here. What I am challenged to do is I run public-private partnerships. But it's a name I made up. So what I actually do is I run our business globally with NGOs, with the humanitarian sector, with the development sector, and with governments. And you notice I said business. So I think earlier when I arrived here, someone asked me if I was the sustainability officer. I said, no, I'm not. I'm not about sustainability. I'm not about CSR. What we at MasterCard are about is we've created, I would call it a double bottom line business. And that double bottom line business is a recognition that we as a private sector company not only have a moral imperative, I would say, but we have a huge capacity to create scalable, sustainable change in the world. Change in the form of, I mean, I can go through all the SDGs, right? I mean, we have the ability to create, gender equality by creating access to finance for women and by creating control over those finances. We have the ability to help alleviate poverty, right? We know that GDP rises and poverty alleviates when you implement digital payments infrastructures. We have the ability to grow economies, right? We know that leakages from cash result in tolls on your economy of up to 2% of your GDP. In some markets, when you are doing government benefits disbursements and things like that, some markets have seen losses of upwards of 10%. 10% just leaves as a result of leakage. You know what leakage is? It's theft. That's what leakage is. So we know we have the ability to have impact, right, on some of the most world's critical objectives. Now, but I'm not CSR. What does that mean? For us, it's about figuring out how we can do this in a sustainable way, and that means a profitable way. So I'm tasked with coming up with innovations, with solutions that tackle the world's biggest challenges. So we have deployments working with the World Food Program, with Mercy Corps, with World Vision to deliver humanitarian aid assistance in a more effective way. We've built a digital aid voucher that can give a beneficiary in a market the ability to receive what they would have gotten on a paper voucher. That paper voucher was probably subject to fraud, to leakage, there's that word again, to fraud and to theft and to graft. We've now digitized that whole process. We can take those digital vouchers and leverage them in a government context as well. What else are we doing? We're creating new solutions and new commercial models that enable commerce to happen at the base of the pyramid. But let me get to, so that's why I think I have the coolest job, right? What we think of public-private partnerships, to me, it's about figuring out commercial, profitable, there's the dirty word that nobody likes to hear when you go to the private sector, profitable ways of creating innovations to create sustainable change. Now, the reason I harp on that word profitability is I really want, when we talk about public-private partnerships, for our interlocutors and our partners to not only embrace it, but to find ways for your corporate partners to make money. Because that's the way they're going to reinvest. Right? If my job is all about innovation, innovation costs a lot of money. I'll tell you, the platform I built to deliver humanitarian aid cost me millions to build. Okay? Probably if I had to build it over, I'd build it more efficiently. It might not cost me as much. But it was the first time. That's why it's innovation. In order for me to have a version 2 and a version 3 and a version 4 that starts to connect that humanitarian aid assistance into now building broader economic infrastructures for government. So we're looking at ways to create smart identity. How can we, in partnership, for example, with the government of Nigeria, not just issue an ID that's a dumb ID, but one that connects into the financial ecosystems that enables aid to come onto it, benefits to come onto it, remittances to come onto it, right? How can we work with governments and create e-gov portals that enable the efficient collection and mobilization of tax revenues? I'm sure I'm over my 5 minutes. So,
but since you're speaking on behalf of the entire private sector,
right, I think I should get a little bit more than just the whole. Now I'm going to speak on behalf of McDonald's. So I guess I'll wrap up there. I think embrace the pride. I would say, how do we start to get tactical? And the way we start to get tactical is by embracing the profit motive, looking for ways for private sector to actually make money, creating an enabling environment, and then creating an operational infrastructure. What does that operational infrastructure mean? Ways for us to engage, contractual means for us to engage that don't involve lengthy 3-year RFP consultative processes. Because I think there's a lot of capabilities, not just with MasterCard, but for the broader private sector to really leverage against this key objective. I've just highlighted sort of a few of them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tara, that was great, thank you. And we're going to turn next to Joshua Magodo, Director of Economic Affairs in the Kenyan Foreign Ministry. And again, Joshua, extremely grateful to you for stepping in at short notice to join this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator, distinguished panelists, and ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for us to be here this afternoon to share our experiences in the implementation of the SDGs. And to say, first and foremost, to also thank Bangladesh and Canada for organizing this very, very important event. Before I make about 3 points, I would also want to thank most of you who were with us in Nairobi in November last year for the second high-level meeting of the Global Partnership for Effective Development from November 30th to December 1st, 2016. Let me start by saying that I would say that we are very lucky as a country because we are already prepared what we call the Vision 2030, which was the implementation of Vision 2030 beginning in 2008. That was the first horizon. The first horizon of the implementation of the vision. Sorry for that. Fortunately, our Vision 2030, which is anchored on 3 pillars, which is social, economic, and political, is really reflecting very well in line with the SDG 3 pillars, which are social, economic, and environment. So you see that we are very lucky that already the SDGs fit very well into our national development blueprint. And what we had to do immediately after the adoption of the SDGs was to mainstream the SDGs into our national development strategy. And in so doing, what we did was that we divided it into 3 categories. First and foremost, planning for the SDGs. Second, budgeting for the SDGs. And third, tracking the progress in the implementation of the SDGs. And so that is what we have done, and we are very confident that this will be our third medium-term plan. We will be able to ensure that the SDGs are properly cut out for implementation. Now, the second point that I want to talk about is the resource mobilization, which is very critical for us as a country. And at the continental level, let me just start by giving an example of the infrastructural deficit that we are facing in Africa. The report that has just come out by the World Bank showing that we need about $100 billion per year for the next 10 years. That is $100 billion this year, $100 billion next year for the next 10 years in order to transform our infrastructural deficit. Now, our countries are only able to raise about half of that. We are able to raise, in Africa, we are able to raise about $45 billion in order to just, efforts to transform the infrastructural deficit. Now, the impact has been that that infrastructural deficit of about $50 billion has led to the competitiveness of Africa by about 40 percentage points. It has reduced our economic growth by about 3% growth per annum. So in other words, if we were to grow if our target was to grow at, let's say, 10% or 7% per annum, then we end up finding ourselves only realizing about 4% per annum. And this is attributed to the huge infrastructure deficit. And therefore, the need for us to focus on infrastructure transformation through global partnership, through global domestic mobilization initiatives is something that we have to focus on first and foremost in order for us to really have an impact in meeting the SDGs. But we are also lucky that through the regional cooperation and integration, we have been able to really reduce the infrastructure deficit that we're facing at the moment. Now, the global partnership for development is therefore crucial in ensuring that we meet the SDGs. And third, I just want to say that the all-inclusive approach in policy implementation is what the government of Kenya really emphasized on. It is the inclusive approach involving all the stakeholders in not only policy implementation but also policy formulation. So when we talk about the Vision 2030 or Vision 2030, we are talking about how all the stakeholders, the private sector, the civil society, the academia, the persons with disabilities, all participate in the preparation of the policy and all participate in the implementation of the policy. We think that is very crucial so that the national ownership and the feeling by all the stakeholders that were involved not only in the implementation but also in the formulation of the policy. We believe that it's a good, good way of enabling everybody else to work towards the meeting of the SDGs. And regarding going back to the domestic resource mobilizations, and Mr. Moderator, maybe I should have mentioned, is the fact that domestic resource mobilization have proved not to be sufficient in most of our countries. In Kenya, we have worked hard to finance our budget, nearly 90% of the budget through domestic resource mobilization. But we all also know that domestic resource mobilization, if not properly managed, has the danger of adversely impacting on the fiscal and the monetary policies of a country. It has the capacity to reduce what is really needed, and that is the capacity or the propensity of countries to save. And therefore, we really have to strike a balance when we talk about this domestic resource mobilization for our development. I think I will not want to go so much in the details, but just to say that we are really looking forward to the implementation of the Nairobi outcome document. We are very committed to ensuring that we play the lead, and indeed very much greatly honored to have hosted this important meeting. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Joshua. And our final panelist, representing as co-chair the Civil Society Platform for Development Effectiveness from Netlight Ghana, Patricia Blankson-Akakko. So, Patricia, over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This morning I was at the SDG 1 review meeting, and the trade unions were called last, and the representative said that he hoped workers' issues were not being considered last. So I hope the civil society is not being considered as the last people in this process.
Patricia, in this meeting we save the best till last.
So I get all the minutes. Mr. Moderator, distinguished panelists and guests, let me also take this opportunity to thank Bangladesh and Canada for organizing this event, because to us, coming from CPDE, is very key to us. This event is very key to us because it will enable us to discuss together how we can make multi-stakeholder partnerships transparent and inclusive at the country level. And because also from where I'm standing from forensic SO perspective, governments may share the wonderful partnership mechanism that is going on at the country level, but I may have a different perspective because I'm coming from civil society and also from a women's rights perspective. The CSO Partnership for Development Effectiveness has a global platform representing the voice of CSOs in the global partnership, works to promote development effectiveness through concrete CSO action, utilizing a mix of approaches in policy advocacy, engagement, outreach, and capacity development at global, regional, sub-regional, and national levels. One of our key interventions for taking stock of the progress in implementing the effective development cooperation at global, regional, and country level is the production of the Global Synthesis Report, which presents country case studies on the commitment of the global partnership. So when we talk about major game-changing innovations at the country level in terms of multi-stakeholder partnerships, few innovations come to mind, but I would like to share the Ecuadorian experience, which is captured in our 2016 synthesis report, on how multi-stakeholder partnership worked after the April 2016 earthquake in Ecuador. Of course, foreign aid played an important role, but the focus of government and civil society efforts on the launching of an internal emergency aid campaign proved to be highly successful. And for us, we think this is one, if we want to look at some of the innovations happening at the country level, this is one that we can cite. But that doesn't mean that everything is also transparent and inclusive. Coordination and harmonization between the government and the CSO in the wake of the earthquake was such that the previously stark dichotomy between the two sets of actors, that's civil society and government, seemed at the time to be receded into the background. However, this seemingly partnership had huge challenges. It had huge challenges because primarily there was a conflict-ridden political scenario and a working civil society. As such, even though civil societies in Ecuador had a major role in the reconstruction efforts, after the earthquake, there still exists a tension about the apparent dichotomy between civil society and the state. But we will also understand that Ecuador is not an exceptional situation. Many countries, especially from the global south, are going through similar experiences of short-term, unstructured, multi-stakeholder partnerships, which can best be described as, and this is in my own words, marriage of convenience. Because something happens and we want to, let's come together quickly to ensure that what we achieve our objective, but there are no formalized structures to ensure that this is permanent. So kind of marriage of convenience to address an issue. How do we leverage the experiences and comparative advantages of all actors to accelerate development and progress and also to increase accountability? There is the need to leverage experiences and comparative advantage as well as increase accountability, but how do we do this? I'm asking how do we do this because the playing field is unequal. For example, the creation of regional councils in Colombia to deal with planning, peace, social policy, and civic participation is the result of attempts at facilitating multi-stakeholder dialogue. Yet, there remain serious obstacles that break CSO value offer. So if we are talking about comparative advantage, how do we do that? Even when policies that are put in place tends to break CSO value. With regard to accountability, despite progress in transparency in terms of, for example, increasing availability of information through the International Aid Transparency Initiative, measured by GBED's Indicator 4, still significant challenges remain in terms of the sufficiency and accessibility of information for citizens seeking to use them for accountability purposes. Again, while the Development Cooperation Framework of Mutual Accountability is supposed to be applicable to all, yet the strongest accountability link remains that between donors and government, and is still in many cases far from mutual. How do we then leverage experiences and comparative advantages of all actors to accelerate development progress? I think the following things are crucial. One, ensure that multi-stakeholder structures are permanent. Talking mainly about improving the quality of multi-stakeholder partnerships is meaningless if these are only temporary, or in many cases, governments end up purposely impeding the participation of many of the stakeholders. To promote integration of human rights in accountability practices and promote the inclusion of citizens and development beneficiaries in accountability practices. We also need to establish standards for identifying and consulting with affected communities and appropriate grievance mechanisms. If we say that no one should be left behind, then the communities that we are working with, we need also to consult them in whatever policies, whatever interventions that are put in place. Ensure that technical cooperation empowers non-state actors, such as CSOs, including women rights organizations, working towards people-centered development outcomes. Primary stakeholders must be in focus. There should be clear effort to combat shrinking spaces for CSOs. and establish an enabling environment. If we want to work together, if we want to promote transparent and inclusive partnership, then we really have to look at stringing spaces for civil society. While diversity and inclusion are important factors to true multi-stakeholder partnerships, there is a need for emphasis on the participation of primary stakeholders, the poorest and marginalized sectors that are often left out in the development process. We also must ensure that governments and partners live up to their commitments and put in practice institutional and legal mechanisms as well as funds and programs that ensure that the implementation of the SDGs become a reality. Current structures are very restrictive and inconvenient for civil society. This is in stark comparison with the private sector, for example, and I hope Pastor Card will not fight with me here, in which in many international agreements today are increasingly gaining unregulated environments and preferential treatment. And we heard from MasterCard that for private sector, sustainability means profitability. So this is something that we have to think about. The atmosphere at the country level should become more conducive for CSO participation rather than limiting. There is a need to go back to fostering accountability because this is not being done. Simply having multi-stakeholder partnerships does not mean accountability is being promoted, most especially since most of these arrangements do not have formal accountability mechanisms. It is thus very important for multi-stakeholder partnerships to incorporate regular monitoring and reviewing practices for their objectives and targets, as well as always reflect global and regional agreements such as the Nairobi Outcome document. And I hope when we do some of these things, then we would get to ensuring that there is a transparent, inclusive, and multi-stakeholder partnership at the country level. No one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Well, representing the whole of the private sector is a lot to ask of one person, and representing the whole of civil society, maybe even more to ask. I do want to use the remaining time we have, which is 20 minutes, give or take, to invite contributions to the audience. I was going to ask the Ambassador from Honduras, but unfortunately he's had to leave just as I was about to turn to him. But you know, among the many partners in the global partnership, we have, of course, private sector, civil society, others, including trade unions, but local government too. And I'm very happy that we have in the audience Mr. Jan van Zanen, the Mayor of Utrecht in the Netherlands, who is here on behalf of the United Cities and Local Governments. And UCLG, as some of you will know, is the steering committee member of the Global Partnership for Local Government. So Jan, please, a few words from you.
Thank you, Bangladesh. Thank you, Canada, for organizing this. And let me put it this way. I don't think credit is your own issue, people. I'm not sure about that, Tara. But I don't agree that profitability is a dirty word, Patricia, because I think if we can't get those goals done without being profitable to ourselves, it won't work. And I agree that with Tara. You said good words, Patricia. I agree totally that when we consult the people, we have to be permanent and no one can be left behind. But let me make two comments, Mr. Chair. Public-private partnerships are essential to address global challenges. However, too often, and actually it happened in this panel again, too often the public part of these partnerships and in multi-stakeholder dialogues is limited to national governments. And the impact of all global challenges, both environmental and social, is felt first and foremost around the corner at local government, at local level. Wherever you live, all the effects are having our neighbors, our children, our grandparents, our parents around the corner. And the essential role of local governments is often overlooked. And I would like to stress today, therefore, include local governments in preparing, getting the SDGs achieved, to start with including them in preparing the voluntary national reports. We cannot do without the multi-stakeholder environment. We cannot do without international and national government. But please do not forget the people around the corner, their local governments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan. So we still have a bit of time, 15-20 minutes. So I see two people to begin with. Okay, more hands going up. Gentleman wearing glasses in the middle of the room, yes. And then the woman sitting 2 rows from the back after that, please. So we'll take 2 or 3 at a time. And sorry, please introduce yourself.
I'm Alessandro Motro, the Interparliamentary Union. Parliaments, as you know, are also part of the global partnership. I don't disagree with anything in particular from this panel, but I think we need to take a step back for a second. And going back to your comment, moderator, at the outset, the government cannot do it alone, therefore we need to open up for these partnerships. That's possibly true, but also we have to be careful not to provide an excuse for governments to fail in their responsibility. I think there is a fine line to be drawn. How far does the role of government go, and when and where does the partnership come into the equation as a necessary thing? I'll go back to a very clear example because I'm very tempted, since we have MasterCard on the panel, although it has nothing to do with you, but it's from the financial sector. Right here in America, 30 million people go unbanked, do not have a bank account. And presumably that means do not have a credit card or a debit card, I don't know. There were proposals in Congress to do what Italy, France and other countries have done, which is open up the postal service, make every post office a bank service as well, owned by the government. It would pay for itself in no time. It would offer low rates. It would be very beneficial to those 30 million customers. And there was opposition from the financial industry, particularly, to go in that direction. Many people in Congress are captured by private interests, and they don't vote for this report. So there is, in my view, a political discussion to be held as to the role and responsibility of government to assume that responsibility. Governments can lead, and above all, they are responsible for setting the rules of the game, including rules that would help steer investments towards the SDGs through the private sector. So I'm all for that. But let's not forget that there is a direct responsibility. So profitability, yes, but there's also a role for public service, especially when people cannot afford a certain service.
Thank you.
On the question of accountability, I just want to say one
Sure.
thing very important, because it's been raised many times. One of the downsides of this proliferation of partnerships is that they may go the way, they may be very extra-parliamentary. There is no direct accountability back to the people through their elected representatives in parliament. So I really think it's important that all of these discussions somehow be accounted to, these partnerships, be accounted to the parliaments in countries. And as we know, in many developing countries, both the government and the parliaments are unable to hold, to exercise this role. They themselves need to receive more support in order to exercise this role from the donor community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple more speakers coming. I do, if you'll forgive me, I do just want to recognise the Ambassador from Honduras, who I was glad to see was able to come back. Alejandro, who last year was Vice President of ECOSOC, as some of you will know. But I just want to mention, if you'll allow me, Honduras recently hosted in Tegucigalpa the first Development Cooperation Effectiveness Forum to plan how to implement the Nairobi document. So a great example, if I may say so, of countries helping to take forward these commitments, these principles, and most importantly, put them into action and talk about what that involves in practice. So I'm glad you could join us. If you would like to come in a moment, or indeed now, you're welcome. I do have another speaker at the back of the room. then I can come to you and the lady next to you. But first, the lady in the back of the room, please. And then you. And you.
Hello, my name is Mwan Bichleche from Zambia. I'm working with the civil society Skinny and Nutrition there. I just wanted to recognize that we all know that the Sustainable Development Goals are interlinked and that achieving one of them will need to achieve most of them. But what I wanted to point out is the fact that there are already existing multi-stakeholder platforms at country, national level, as well as local government level. And when we have these conversations, how do we ensure that we don't go and start recreating what already exists and that we incorporate what exists at country level into any other efforts that we're going to undertake? I'll give an example, for instance, our role as civil society in Zambia, and how we've been able to create the networks with the parliamentarians, for instance, which is something that you brought out in terms of accountability, but also bringing onto board the media and also having the UN and donor networks in the country. So we have some of those structures existing, but other times what I've also noted back home is that whenever we come up with new ideas, we tend to recreate the very same structures. And then we have 5 structures trying to achieve the same thing, and then end up not achieving anything.
Got it, thank you. We're quite good at that here. I'm conscious as we go on, more and more hands going up, so I would like to bring in as many people as possible. So I will ask you when you speak to be as concise as possible. But with that, 2 people in the middle of the room, the woman in white and Alessandra, if you would like to say something, please.
I would like to share with you my interesting experience. I'm from Poland, and I worked in years 2006 in the regional contact point for implementing of R&D European program in my region, in all regions. And before I worked in my region in R&D and also as a head of marketing with success. So in international cooperation. And then I was employed in the university to make that. And I met problem. And how to involve all stakeholders in common development of the European Union. And I started to work, and in the result, I formulated such very easy model, and I used that model in that years, in that stop. It was very easy. That the people live in regions or other territories, and they manufacture goods and they fulfill human needs, and they are also institutions as education in and research, and they work in the region as aligned vertically. Yes, because development goes through the region. In all countries, it's the same structures. They are institutions as enterprises, education, and research, and authorities. And all this is I aligned or that or the institution vertically. And aimed in the regions to development of the regions, and moreover are aligned the horizontal levels of enterprises, education, research, and I supported that also in the European networks. As enterprises, so my region, I directed my region towards the development of my region and cooperated in horizontal levels with other regions and promoted for all regions the same model, and we cooperated very Very good. I involved in the activities the European Business Network, also Airbus, so such companies.
I'm afraid I will need to ask you to...
It is so. So it is ready, and it is also for institution. And I could say that the institution, all the institution form GDP. So they all work for GDP, and so is a model for countries, in fact.
I'm so sorry, but there are other people who want to speak, so I must ask you to close, please.
Yes, I finish. Also that it is a mistake. Also the civil society, it is no civil society. All people should work in the institutions, or in education, or so it is.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you.
It is ready, and I extended it by early November last year, so it is completed.
Good. Thank you, Ambassador. If you, sorry, could we have the microphone back in the same row, please?
Thank you, Michael. I also thank the missions of Bangladesh and Canada for organizing this most pertinent event. As you well stated, Honduras has been very actively involved in the global partnership. We were active in Busan, we were after the process led by the OCDE, also Panelist Busan, participating. And recently, 2 weeks ago, we had the first forum for the effective and development cooperation. I must highlight that it was more successful than we anticipated, in the sense that it allowed us to evidence the commitment from different sectors of society that probably were not as visible or as visibly involved before the forum. The Agenda 2030 is an enormous challenge, but it introduces very interesting principles that force us to change our mindset towards development, the way we understand development efforts. When we speak of universality and complementarity and integrality, we no longer can continue talking about developing world or developed world or development institutions or the government doing this and the other doing that. Universality means that we are all involved in a common effort. Because otherwise, if we are not engaging in these challenges, if we're not engaging in this commitment, all together with all different actors, consequences will be universal. And no one will be left out of those consequences. So these initiatives, engaging with the multi-sector partners, engaging in the alignment of development cooperation and development vision is a crucial initiative if we want to move forward to achieving the SDGs. So once again, I think this is a highly commendable initiative, this is a highly commendable effort, and I'm very glad that we are having an opportunity to share it during the HLPF.
Good. Thank you very much. We have somebody on the far side, a group of three there, and then somebody in the front row. We're probably going to run out of time soon after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Marianne Weisheim. I'm directing a 12-year research project on partnerships for sustainable development. And we have been asking various stakeholders about their experiences with partnerships in the past 10 years and how they translate that for the coming generation of partnerships to implement the SDGs. And as Ambassador Grant said, building partnerships is hard work. And Tara said we need an enabling environment, and Patricia said we need to ensure accountability. And in the invitation to this side event, it said that you also want to talk about experiences with setting up and operating country-level multi-stakeholder partnership platforms. Actually, in our own research, we tried to find these national-level platforms, and we had difficulties to really find them. For example, in Kenya, you have a platform for the private sector, the Private Sector SDG Forum, and you have a platform for the CSOs, the SDGs Kenya Forum. But there's actually no platform that brings these actors together to form these multi-stakeholder partnerships, which is in fact hard work. And I was wondering whether anyone has experiences with these kind of platforms doing both, enabling partnerships, but also ensuring that they deliver, that they are inclusive, transparent, and that there's in the end accountability.
Okay, thank you very much. The two people, yes, one more together, please.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My intervention has to do with the complexity of implementing SDGs, and particularly they are universal, but we do believe that implementation and achieving them at the national level is what is going to make a reality. Therefore, hearing experiences, especially maybe from Kenya, how they are localized by making it Vision 2030, using development plan, and also using country system, then it shows that that kind of approach, we would want to hear what was a success, what worked and why, what didn't work. So I think, to me, that is a very important approach because of the complexity of implementing these goals. Two, to make it short, is to do with the Patricia. She did mention that she recommends stakeholders partnership to be permanent. And I was struggling and reflecting on it, living in this kind of world where there are rapid changes. What kind of model would work so that whatever partnership we have, we will, even if they are not become permanent, what framework would we think through so that they will end up helping us in 1 year or so implement these SDGs. I am a co-chair of Effective Institution Platform, which is a network of global partnership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the gentleman next to you, and then we'll be in the front row. So please. No, oh, I'm sorry. So another familiar face from the Global Partnership Steering Committee.
Good afternoon, my name is Tetat Lauran. I'm from the Civil Society Partnership for Development Effectiveness. Together with Patricia, I'm one of the co-chairs. And we have history for many people in the room. Perhaps just to commend and thank the governments of Canada and Bangladesh for making this activity happen, because it is needed, it is timely, it is relevant. We have a lot of global agreements that are, nice on paper, it feels good and aspirational, but then it lacks expression and articulation and implementation at the country level. So, as civil society, we are always saying we want good practices, but as civil society, we are always about bad practices. No? So, this is one initiative where we hope that, we can finally have some good practices and good stories to share, because at country level, this is also where the sticky issues are happening and taking place. No? We talk about private sector, we talk about civil society, human rights, which is, a sticky issue for many governments, especially in the South. And of course, we also have to talk about enabling laws and legislation. So, just to commend the effort of the GPEDC, and CPDE supports this initiative. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, people have been very concise, and I'm grateful for that. So, we maybe can take one or two more. But otherwise, I'm going to turn back to the panelists to see, and we'll start with Patricia this time. And see if I may just ask you for 1 minute each with any comments or reactions to what you've heard from other speakers.
Yeah, I will just respond to the my sister from Zambia, to say that if there are already existing platforms, there is no need to reinvent the wheel. We have to make use of the existing platforms, but we should ensure that it's institutionalized. We should ensure that the partnership is mutual, and everybody has equal rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Joshua.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to mention that it is true that we cannot it's true that what Zambia said, that to meet the targets that we have set in the 17 SDGs, when we do one, when we have to meet one of them, it means that it will have an impact on the others. And I think that is very, very important. But important also to recognize the fact that to link those SDGs that can have a multiplier effect on each other. And what I said, especially regarding the infrastructural deficit, for instance, we know very well that the impact of infrastructure development, for instance, in Africa, will definitely have a direct impact and a multiplier effect impact on other SDGs. So it's important that we be able to sequence and link out those SDGs that, if well implemented, will definitely have an impact on others. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that, and what we are doing as a country is to ensure that we strike a balance between the implementation of, between the three pillars of sustainable development, and that is economic, social, and environment. We know very well that that was the major deficit in the implementation of the MDGs, whereby there was no proper balance. In Kenya, what we are doing is to strike a balance between the social, economic, and political. And obviously, when we link it to the SDGs, you also have to look at the implementation of the SDGs in a balanced manner, taking into account the social, economic, and environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tara, please.
I want to thank you, thank again the governments of Canada and the governments of Bangladesh for including MasterCard and the private sector in the dialogue. I think I just wanted to reflect really quickly on the comment about comparative advantage and maybe close on the notion of what is comparative advantage for us at MasterCard and perhaps the private sector. The way we approach things is we're really good at defining problems. So something's wrong, what's going on, defining what we would call business requirements. Something's wrong, how do we define it? We're good at innovating solutions to that. Those solutions can be digital in our case, they can be various types of solutions. And then we're good at implementing those things. Those are the three things that we're good at. So I think when governments and when NGOs and the civil society sector have these challenges, you can look to private sector partners to come, assess a problem, to innovate, and then to implement. What we are not very good at is anything that involves the words philanthropy, multi-stakeholder, or high-level panel.
Thank you. Michael.
Yes, thanks very much, Michael. Just a few comments of some of the takeaways that I have. On the issue of kind of space for civil society, I think we would definitely agree on the need for permanency, but there has to be flexibility. There's no two societies, governments, NGO communities, private sectors are created equal. In some places you have a history of non-governmental involvement, and some you don't have any. So there needs to be flexibility. Right now, as I can say from a foreign ministry perspective, there is nothing we do at the United Nations where we do not engage civil society. And if we're not engaging civil society, we're not doing our job. And this isn't a question of ticking the box. It's a question of providing better analysis to my own government. And I know that works for colleagues in headquarters as well. The risk of shrinking space is real. And it didn't really come up so much in this room. But it's real, and it's something that we're facing here at the UN, at other multilateral bodies, and we know it's happening in some countries as well. And we need to continue to fight against this. So I know there's strong advocates in that. In many instances, the partnerships, especially in initial stages, it's a bit of translation of language. And I know our experience in the SDG financing, it seems like what we've been doing for the last 6 months is interpreting what is the Agenda 2030 for the private sector world. Not that they didn't know what was out there, but what does it mean from a government perspective or from the civil society perspective, and vice versa. And so that's why it's vitally important that in these settings and all, we speak truthfully. So hearing phrases like, profits are not a dirty word, it's important. And we have to look at what motivates key development players. And if we don't, we're kind of fooling ourselves. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Michael. And Norman.
What I'd like to say, I'd like to flag up 2 points. I think we strongly believe that the collaboration between the high-level political platform and the GPDC is highly needed to create synergistic impact of our development efforts at the country level. And when you speak about the country level, as one of our participants in this discussion, that it is not possible for the government to implement SDGs at the ground level. What will be needed, as we are speaking, I am speaking for quite some time now, we have to translate these messages of multi-stakeholder approach to our country level. Everyone has some responsibility. We will be calling upon everyone, development partners, the civil society, the global platform and other platforms to convey these messages at the country level. We can put the country or the government on top to answer our questions, but at the same time, when we speak about multi-stakeholder approaches, we need to speak from the same platform, the same languages, and that has to be transferred from you at the global level to your country offices. Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Manuel, and again to all of the speakers representing different constituencies, not only on the panel but others in the audience. So thank you for all your contributions, and again to the governments of Bangladesh and Canada for hosting and supporting this event. I'm not going to try and sum everything up because time is short and I'm sure you're all very keen to get back across the street. I will just flag that among the issues we talked about today, I'm sure many of you have been involved yesterday and today already in various discussions in and around the high-level political forum on these topics, and there will be many more opportunities over the rest of the week, including, I'll just flag 3 in particular. This afternoon from 3 till 6 in conference room 4, a thematic review, multi-stakeholder perspectives, and Tara, I apologise for the terminology, eradicating poverty and promoting prosperity in a changing world. And then on Thursday from 3 till 4, also in conference room 4, thematic review on SDG 17, investing in and financing for the SDGs, and several people on the panel and from the floor have talked about the fundamental issues of financing and resources. And in addition, actually next Monday, during the ECSOC level segment, the entire day in conference room 1, a partnership exchange special event. But I have to say, personally, as somebody who was delegate for 4 years, I have a lot of sympathy with Tara's point about language, and I think most of us who work at the UN on a regular basis feel some of the same allergies when we hear phrases like high-level panel. The only thing that strikes more fear into the hearts of many delegates than high-level panel is when you're told it's an interactive high-level panel. But having said that, I think we have had good interaction today, and without giving a summary, I just want to underline a number of points. I think it was useful and interesting to hear from government representatives from Bangladesh, Canada, Kenya, others, about some of the challenges, but also some of the changes and the new, I mean not new in the last few months, but growing and intensifying. In particular, for example, South-South cooperation and Southern partners. The focus on the domestic private sector, as well as domestic resources more broadly. Innovative financing, which Michael spoke about. But Joshua reminded us of the scale of the challenge in terms of resource mobilisation in the assessment of the World Bank. But I'm glad we also heard from Patricia and others speaking on behalf of civil society, including we certainly need to go beyond rhetoric when we talk about partnerships with civil society and how can we find ways to all of us, national government, local government, to the extent we can support that from the UN system, of empowering civil society and giving them a voice. And I always think it's worth reminding ourselves, whichever hat, so to speak, each of us has come here wearing, every single one of us is a member of civil society. We don't just have day jobs, we're also human beings. We're all a member of the private sector. So in the rest of today, we'll all be operating as a member of civil society, as a member of the private sector. So let's remember, this isn't about them and us. It's actually about how can we work together more cohesively and more effectively. There probably are 1 or 2 governments in the world that don't engage with the private sector, but I'd be surprised if it's more than 1 or 2. So let's keep those things in mind. But also when we talk about government, and I use the term rather loosely, national government, local government, but also parliamentarians, as others have reminded us. And at the same time, the involvement of all of these different stakeholders doesn't absolve national governments, or indeed the UN system, of the responsibilities to play their part. So let's not lose sight of the fact, for example, that as we talk about doing better, working together to mobilise domestic resources, to engage the private sector. There is a fundamental critical role for ODA and for something that only governments can do. And that's even more true in some countries than others, but it's a fundamental truth that we shouldn't lose sight of as we discuss how to bring others in to this work. And finally, I know Alejandro had to leave, but I'm glad that Ambassador Conjuras reminded us of how many things have changed in terms of how we work, how we look at these issues, how we cooperate together. So on that note, I will conclude, but again, thank you very much to all of you, but especially, and please give a hand to the panelists.
No.